Star Wars Outlaws, the highly anticipated open world game set in the Star Wars universe, is set to release the 30th of this month, or with the 3 days early access throughout the deluxe or the ultimate edition. I'm gonna give you my honest opinion and review about the game, as Ubisoft was kind enough to share a review code with me, and no, I'm not getting paid, or Ubisoft is seeing this review beforehand. So let's dive right in. In a galaxy far, far away— no, I'm just kidding. Star Wars Outlaws follows the story of Kay Vess, a scoundrel that has been living the scoundrel way all her life. She has a cute and handy little helper named Nyx. This little critter will be your sidekick most of the time, and the addition of Nyx in the game is not just a companion that accompanies you throughout the story, but he's also a big part of the game mechanics, as Nyx can fetch things for you that are out of reach, open doors, distract enemies, and even helps you take them out from time to time. Nyx is a fun and easy to use mechanic that brings a little change in how you can approach things within the game and overall makes life a bit easier. The game takes place roughly 25 years after the Clone Wars, and the Jedis or even the Force are nowhere to be found. You and your little companion are trying to set up a crew to pull off the greatest heist in the galaxy after a failed attempt earlier. This earlier attempt has given Kay the Death Mark status, and with the robbery, Kay hopes to remove the Death Mark from her head. While trying to find the best heist crew in the universe, you travel between different planets, taking on and helping different factions living and occupying these planets. These factions, like the Hutts or the Pikes, will have different impacts on the way that you play the game. They are not only sending you on quests and missions across the galaxy, but also have a reputation system connecting to them as you complete jobs. This system will reward you with points to get on their good side, and this will, for example, make areas better accessible and even earn faction gear that will give you an in-game bonus. But this system works both ways. When you disappoint or even take on one of the 4 factions, you will lose favorability, and it will make your stay in their occupied areas a little bit more tough to explore. You can even piss them off to a certain point that the faction themselves will hire a hit squad to take you out, and whenever you set foot in their territory, they will have their blasters ready. It is a nice addition that lets you think twice before screwing them over, although it's more catered to the open world, as I had a Pike hit squad hunting me down while at the same time hanging out with their faction leader, following the story quests or even the faction missions that they have to offer. It will probably hold you back too much in completing the story if it stopped you and forced you to get on their good side again before you get advanced in the main story, what no one really is waiting for as well. So overall, it's a fun and good addition, but could have had a bigger impact on the game in my opinion. While traveling the galaxy, you are armed with a blaster that you can upgrade over time by installing different modules like shock or even an exploding ray. This, next to your hands, is the only weapon you carry around. But this doesn't mean that you cannot use other weapons, as there are 14 different weapons to be used while picked up from fallen enemies or picked up from weapon racks. These guns are very strong and will definitely help you out whenever you are in a massive blaster fight. The only downfall is that you cannot take these blasters with you. It is a one and done kind of deal. When the blaster is empty, Kay will discard the weapon, and even if the blaster is not empty, the moment that you crawl through a vent, open a door, climb a wall, or whenever you need to interact with something, it instantly drops the weapon And that was a kind of a bummer to me. You cannot take these weapons all the way with you. The gunplay is fun, but in my opinion could have been a lot better. Especially with a studio like Massive Entertainment behind it having a great track record with third-person shooters like Division 1 and 2. But don't get too bummed out about this, as 80% of the game, maybe 70, but more towards the 80%, you are sneaking around and you kinda want to avoid the blaster fights. Next to you being very squishy, low on health, where 3 to 4 blaster hits can take you out, it's also not possible to even draw your blaster, as you can't trip any alarms or you will be resetted to your last checkpoint. This is not always the case, as you can for sure open fire and take on missions while blasting through everything, but most of the time you use nicks and your own stealth to take out enemies. It's not the most intricate system and has borrowed a lot from their studio's brother Assassin's Creed, with hiding in the tall grass or in smoke. And don't get me wrong, I like sneaking around, a huge fan of the Assassin's Creed series and the more stealthy approach within games. But I would love to have the opportunity to do both. If I want to sneak, I sneak. But if I just want to take on an entire base within a mission with just my blaster, that should be possible as well. And for now, it is not really possible in most missions, as we need to sneak and we cannot trip alarms. When doing all these missions and quests, you travel the different planets within the galaxy, where this game really shines. The ambience of every planet is so freaking awesome. The worlds are filled with random events, as for example Imperial armies attack a nearby pirate location, NPCs getting shaken down by the factions or even the Imperial army within the cities, people working in their shops, and creatures just enjoying life on their planets. There's almost always something happening, what's also giving you many opportunities, as the NPCs are not just a filler but also can lead to important locations or even special vendors by eavesdropping on them or just interacting with them in the open world and doing favors for them. The music makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable and just elevates the already awesome ambience. It's not all perfect, of course, where there are times that the NPCs are just that and don't really add anything extra, especially the ones on the speeders in the open world. They are very generic and are just there as a filler. Even if you cross through enemy territory and they come after you on their speeders, it is very easy to lose them or even take them out, as it takes them longer to jump off their speeder than my 80-year-old grandma. You of course have a speeder as well to travel across the big planets. This is a decent addition to the game, as it's fast and gets you to places, but that's pretty much it. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't have to have more than that, but the control on this thing is something else. The smallest obstacle will send you flying off your speeder, and the camera precision and the time it resets to default is just straight up terrible. The chosen camera position just shows the back of your speeder and has zero view of what actually is going on the road in front of you. And when you move your camera angle to the position that you like to have it, you have to hold the stick all the time and even move it around to not get resetted to default. I like to roam and discover the worlds, but I chose to try and find as much fast travel points early on in the game, as I could then just skip over this speeder most of the time, because this camera angle and the reset is just ripping this speeder mechanic gameplay apart. With moving around on your speeder while exploring planets, we also have our very own spaceship, the TraillBlazer. This will fly to wherever you want to go and it's fun to do. It gets you out of the sneaking and looting loop straight into space dogfights, space stations, and meteor fields where pirates hide and protect their contraband. It never loses the touch of the Star Wars feel when you switch between land and space, and this is a great switch between space and of course planet combat. Just like the speeder, the ship is also upgradable with certain components and materials that can be found in quests, missions and open world discovery to of course make your vehicle stronger, faster and overall more capable. And you don't really have to go out of your way to find them, as materials are given to you quite often when completing missions and or are easy to find within quests. You still have to do something for it though. It's not just giving to you, or at least the parts that are needed aren't just giving to you, but these are different and fun quests to do as well. The overall design of our vehicles is pretty decent, but especially the ship is not the best, and would have loved to change some more about the appearance than just the colors and a trinket. But then again, it's just a means of transportation, so it's not that big of a deal. Next to changing and upgrading your vehicles, you can of course upgrade yourself as well, and it works a little bit different than other games, as your character upgrades don't work on a simple point system, aka a skill tree, but with an ability system that works with certain NPCs who you meet and are scattered across the galaxy. This is a very fun and refreshing way of boosting your skills. Instead of just putting points in a skill tree, it asks you to complete certain tasks for certain NPCs. These are almost all catered towards individual upgrades. One can help you with controlling your vehicle better, while the other one helps Nyx learns new tricks and make you both stronger, faster, and more importantly, more quiet. This ability system is not the only way to make yourself stronger, as there is no ranking system within the game. You will be the same level throughout the whole game, so to make things more interesting, they added gear and additions for Kay and Nyx. This gear can be found in the highly restricted areas, but from secret vendors or gifted to you from getting more favorability within the different factions. The gear can give you certain boosts, like less detectable, carrying more healing, carrying more grenades, or even making certain blaster modules stronger. Is it needed? No, not really. You can roam the world and or play any mission just with your normal gear or with your normal loadout, but it will definitely make it a lot easier. Next to the gear 4K, we also have trinkets, and we can unlock some more space for them the further you go into the story. These can have a big impact on your gameplay with a lot of handy additions, especially for not being spotted that fast by certain enemies. These will be obtainable by buying them from vendors, finding them in faction vaults, and by completing main and side missions. Then for Nyx there are two additions. One is just for the looks, and you can make your companion look more cute or of course more badass. But the upgrade for Nyx is actually the food that you eat while visiting different planets. This food will have a certain boost for Nyx and can help you within a lot of missions, as for example, one is distracting multiple enemies with Nyx, and the normal one can just only distract one enemy, so that is a very useful one to use while sneaking into the Imperial bases. And there are of course a few more others, but I will let you discover those on your own. The way to get these boosts is not just finding the food vendors, but also eating it while doing a minigame. What I also found such a great addition. You really get sucked in by just eating. Awesome shots from how you and Nyx are eating while everyone around you is just going by their day. Just that extra step within eating with a minigame, and even though it's a small addition, this changes the whole dynamic and is awesome if you ask me. This eating minigame is not the only that you need to do throughout your gameplay, as you have your spike to hack doors and or loot chests, what works on a rhythm-based mechanic, where you have to time the use with the beat. It's a fun mechanic but doesn't freeze time. So whenever you're sneaking through, for example, an Imperial base where you cannot be spotted, and in the midst of all of that you need to listen to a beat to sometimes hit a few different beats to open a door, is not perfect. Most of the times you just get caught and get put back to your save point. These are changeable within the settings though, but we will talk about that a little bit later. The other minigame mechanic next to the game's card game Sabak is slicing. Slicing is one of the strong suits of Kay, as she comes from a notorious slicing family. And this is, to put it mildly, just a filler. It only creates frustration and it doesn't really add any extra dimension to the game. And again, it does not freeze time. And this can take significantly longer than the spike minigame, and there is no logic to it whatsoever. Don't get me wrong, I get the logic. Put a certain amount of tiles, every tile shows up as red, blue or yellow. Red meaning not in the setup, blue meaning in the correct position, and yellow meaning in the setup but in a different position, and that's all. It is straightforward, but just pressing buttons to see which one is right is just random. There is no good or bad way to start. Just pick a tile, add it, and see if it's in the correct spot. I like minigames to open up chests, etc. Makes the game a bit more in depth, but this is just pulling you out of the whole vibe of the game and gets you caught more than it helps you out. Then there is Sabak. Sabak is the card game within Outlaws, and I gotta say I am not the biggest fan of games within games, but this had me playing and trying to beat all the different tables for hours and hours on end. Not that it's so hard, but it's just so enjoyable. It's so much fun, easy and sometimes frustrating, what makes it enjoyable as well. There are certain ways to cheat by using nicks to peek at your opponent's cards, having magnetic dice, or even pulling 2 cards out of the deck instead of the normal one. But your opponents can catch you as well, what can lead up to getting you kicked out of the game, losing your buy-in, and being banned from the table for a while. So it helps you a lot within the game, but it can also backfire on you. And I think again this is a great addition. Not just a game, but also a game that you can use your companion and use your abilities to cheat in the game to get the upper hand. Within Sabak there are also shifts. Shifts are special tiles that can be used at the game to give you the upper hand within the card game, or of course make your opponent's game more difficult. These shift boosts can be won by completing and winning at Sabak tables, bought from vendors and found within the open world. The overall Star Wars feeling and the world has its flaws like every game has, but it's very engaging, fun to play throughout, and overall a very enjoyable game to play. So far I played around 35 hours and I finished the story, I finished some extra faction missions and the side quest, all in around 20 hours or so. But I'm far from done. There is still so much to discover and find that I can easily sink another 30 or so hours within the game. So overall it's a very enjoyable game. It has a very strong Assassin's Creed and Uncharted vibe to the game, while still holding on to their Star Wars roots, and I found it very enjoyable. So let's talk settings for a little bit, as I want every single game to have the amount of settings that Star Wars Outlaws have within their game. You can literally change everything and create it to your own liking. If you're not the biggest fan of the minigames, you can just switch them off, or better said, you can change them to a few random button press to pull off the minigames. You don't have to go into it. But then if you like to have the fights still, difficult, you can keep the fights on hard. Even if you like to take in the full ambience of the open world and don't want to get bothered by NPCs, then you can just switch the difficulty of the NPCs down while still keeping your other settings on hard. I can go on for a lot longer as this is just incredible, but I won't bore you with 10 minutes of talking about game settings. But whenever you boot up the game, look into the settings and see what you can change, and change it to your own liking, however you like to play. So to round this review up, I quickly want to talk about the things that did not go so well, and I of course already expressed my thoughts and or things that could have done better throughout this whole review, but overall the game runs smooth. Only had 3 crashes in my 35 plus hours of gameplay, and that is pretty damn good if you ask me. I have multiple games on my console right now that are out for multiple years that have more bugs than Star Wars on a preview copy of the game. Because don't forget, the bugs and the issues that I ran up to doesn't mean that you will run up to them as well. Hopefully you won't run up to them as well. There's not that many game-breaking bugs in the game, don't get me wrong, but you will have a day 1 update, what I did not receive yet. So that will definitely fix most of the things, or at least make it better. Like I already mentioned, I crashed 3 times in my 35-hour gameplay. The lockpick system or the spike system bugged out, and it had me in an infinite loop where to the point I had to put the settings to simple, or else I couldn't just go further within the mission. I tried to reload the save point, I tried to go back to an earlier save point, I even tried to start the game all over again and nothing worked. This system was bugged for me, so I had to switch it back to basics for most of my playthrough. There is one mission that gets stuck no matter what I do. I reload the checkpoint, I reload an earlier checkpoint, I try to do the whole mission differently, I try to do a different part in the mission what is optional. I tried a bunch of things, but I cannot for the life of me complete this quest. It's not interfering with the main story quest, but it's just a huge bummer, and I hope it gets fixed with the day 1 patch, as this was also the exclusive extra mission that you will get by pre-ordering the deluxe or the ultimate edition. We already talked about the speeder cam that resets too quickly and keeps you fighting your speeder instead of enjoying the beautiful open world, but I just wanted to say it again because that really stopped me from enjoying all these big planets, as I love to roam around, but walking is just not an option. The story is fun, it has its cheeky remarks and is overall pretty well put together, especially the relationships between ND5 and K. But man, the facial expressions in the game are just non-existent. Don't get me wrong, with all the different species in the game and within the universe, I can understand it's harder to pull off different facial expressions. But K or any other human-ish character are just the same in whatever they tell you. If they're upset, if they're angry, if they are happy, whatever it is, it doesn't really affect the facial expressions, and it doesn't really exist in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, the cutscenes are beautiful. The characters and the Star Wars vibe with, for example, Jabba are great. Just like the voice acting, but man, those facial expressions are something else. There were some NPCs floating out of textures and a few minor things like that as well, like a floating speeder, but nothing that you never seen in a game this size before. As I always say, if it's not game breaking, I don't mind. Yes, it can be annoying, but everything and everyone has its flaws, just like games, and I'm not here to nitpick. And then the last minor thing I was bothered by was the climbing. Always having to press X or whatever button it is on your platform to go to the top was annoying. And when trying to climb the stairs with, for me, R3, it was a bit janky. So I always jumped towards the stairs, but that also resetted my crouch. So whenever I was at the end or on the top of the stairs, I was always standing and making noise. With a stealth sim like this, that wasn't really a good combo, but you can also see this as a skill issue on my side. And that's pretty much it. I really enjoyed, and I'm still enjoying the game. It's not the best game out there, but the whole Star Wars mixed in with Assassin's Creed and Uncharted vibes while going through an open world and space is very enjoyable. Hats off to Massive to making yet another fun and engaging open world game. With all the pros and cons, I would give this game a 7 out of 10. If this review helped you out in any way or form and or you liked it, make sure to let me know in the comments down below, and of course hitting that like button. If you're new here and you want to be updated by the future Star Wars news and or updates, hit that subscribe button as well, and I will see you in the next one. PurePrime out!